Hey you, it's Olivia. Thanks for coming back in, or welcome if you're new. Today we're going to continue my international travel series by talking about my trip to Ireland. This trip was actually through a group called EF Ultimate Break. I'll put their link in the description, and if this trip is still an active trip, I will also include that trip itself. And I am thinking to do a review of EF Ultimate Break at some point because this is actually only one out of the 2 trips I've been with on them, so be looking out for that. So this was a pretty short trip, just a little over a week, and I feel like really the highlights I got out of it weren't so much the destinations as the social connections and the culture, but we're still going to go over this kind of chronologically. So it started out in my hometown. I took flights. There was like 3 stopovers because my hometown airport is so small. That was my first time in the Chicago O'Hare Airport. It was so big. Oh my gosh. Let me know down below if you've ever been to the Chicago O'Hare Airport. And I left out of Newark. They have a really good dumpling place there. You should check it out if you're at the airport again. And my favorite thing about the flight over to Ireland was that the plane had Indian food, and I was really starting to get a kick with Indian food, so that was so cool seeing it with my plane food. The airport itself, the first thing that really caught my attention was that the signs were in English and Gaelic. Even though a lot of people in Ireland do not speak Gaelic anymore, they are trying to keep it alive as part of their culture, so they put it on official signs and things like that. And it's just a really cool language. It's not like anything I'd ever seen before. Then I met up with the group and we took a bus to an even bigger bus that took us along the Irish countryside, and our first town was Galway. And it made me think of that Ed Sheeran song, Galway Girl. Honestly, not too much happened in Galway. I remember that it was way colder than I was expecting it to be, so I actually had to get a coat. And while we were at the coat shop, the coat guy noticed that we were Americans. They call all Americans Yankees up there, which was hard for me to process as someone from the American South, because a Yankee is someone from a specific area of the United States for us. But it was an interesting cultural difference. Anyways, he's like, "Oh, you guys are Yanks," I think is what he said. And we're like, "Yeah." And we asked him a good local bar, so we went to this place called the Crane and got a Guinness because that's like the distinctive Irish drink. Then we stayed in that town a night. The next morning we went on a road trip to these cliffs called Cliffs of Moher. They were pretty cool. They reminded me a little bit of the cliffs in Lima. As far as you know, they were these big giant cliffs right over the ocean with these crashing waves underneath. We stayed that night in Killarney, which is a very fun town name. And my favorite thing about Killarney was just we started getting more into the culture. I feel like Killarney was just, it had a little bit more going on. We went to this cute little bar called the Shire. It wasn't very Lord of the Rings inspired. They were making it sound like it would be more so. But it was still cool. We started getting to enjoy the whole live band pub culture, did some music and dancing. That was really fun. And then the next day we went to the Blarney Stone, which is up in a castle. It's part of Irish folklore that supposedly if you kiss the stone, it gives you special charisma or something like that. I can't believe we were doing that during, all of us kissing the same stone. And it's kind of awkward because I wish I still had the video, but it is gone. But basically, to actually get to the stone, you have to have somebody help you lean underneath a portion of the wall. And it's actually kind of scary, but cool experience. Then it was time for Dublin. Dublin was where we were going to be celebrating St. Patrick's Day, because that was kind of the whole thing of the trip. You're celebrating St. Patrick's Day in Ireland. Fun little side note, apparently that's one holiday that Americans celebrate way harder than the Irish. I think we were the ones that kind of turned it into a non-religious drinking festival versus a religious feast day. And I also found out that apparently there's literally more Irish in the United States than there are in Ireland itself, because of some really not so great dark history things that happened that led to a lot of the Irish population leaving their home country. It's actually a very fascinating and heartbreaking part of history that I was not aware of. I had heard a couple of references about the Irish famine before, but while I was there, I got to learn a lot more about the ethnic Irish and just their story under British rule. I even got a book. Oh my gosh, I really wish I had that book to show you guys. If I find it later, because I think it's still up at my parents' house in my hometown, I'm going to publish it down in my community notifications because it was very informative. I made a point to buy it and I read it on the plane ride home. So anyways, back to the story itself. We were there in Dublin for basically the evening before St. Patrick's Day, and we got to go to a little bar, enjoy some more folk music. We even got to put a request in for a song, which was really cool. Then it was already time for St. Patrick's Day. So I had already made a little friend group. It was myself, 2 guys, and 3 other girls. And most of us, I think one girl didn't go. Anyways, most of us decided that we were going to go to the Guinness factory to start off St. Patrick's Day before the parade in Dublin. So we got to go there and learn all about Ireland's famous beer. And that was really cool. They even taught us how to pour a Guinness. I enjoyed that. That was my first drink. And from there, we just kind of kept drinking the whole day. That's the longest I've ever been steadily intoxicated in my whole life. The 2 guys who were in my group had been frat boys in the past, so they knew all about how to have that just steady burn with the alcohol. We even had Powerade bottles that were filled with half Powerade, half vodka. I had never heard of that before. I was not the drinking type in college. Angel actually does get a small little mention in this story because after the parade, we bar hopped a little bit. Then we circled back to the room just to get, ready to go out again for the nighttime. And I video called Angel for a second and I asked him if he wanted to meet my roommates. At this time, myself and one of the other girls had gotten moved into the guys' dorm because all the other girls were sick with the 2020 stuff. So that was unfortunate. I'll be telling you a little bit more about that after St. Patrick's Day. But anyways, we're all up in the dorm getting ready to go out again. I'm calling Angel. And my other girlfriend, she had already gotten way too intoxicated, and she saw him on the phone and he was just and she was like, oh my gosh, he's cute. Are you guys in a physical relationship? And I just said no. And then she knew that because I think she noticed we were talking in Spanish, so she put in Google Translate something really inappropriate and just kept playing it over and over again to Angel. And he literally was looking through pictures with me a year later and remembered that girl because she was acting so crazy. And her craziness did not stop. Like I said, I had a steady buzz going on the whole time, but this friend of mine, we'll call her Abby because I don't want to just keep calling her my girlfriend. So Abby literally ended up just running up and down the streets of Dublin, acting like a crazy drunk fool, and myself and one of my guy friends were just, chasing after her, trying to make sure she didn't get into too much trouble. This is where I can say Dublin definitely feels like a very, very safe city. We were just wandering, not even knowing where we were going. And even when we were in parts where I was kind of this part isn't the best part of town, we still felt totally safe. I would have even felt safe if it was just me looking out for my girlfriend out there. Around 1 a.m., we finally rounded Abby up and we're like, look girl, you need to go to bed. So we all went home, went to sleep. Unfortunately, Abby was starting to feel unwell. And I was hoping it was just the alcohol because like I said, we've been drinking so much. I was like, maybe she's starting to have a hangover from the earlier stuff. I don't know how all that works. But she tested positive for, 2020 stuff the next morning. So she had to go into the quarantine room. And at that point, it was just myself and the guys. I managed not to get sick. I really think it's because I probably got it at least once or twice, although I never officially tested positive to date. There's no way that I didn't get it at least one time and maybe I had one of the rare, where you just have headache symptoms, because I was working in that kind of stuff very frequently back in 2020. But it really did suck for my friends who did get sick because they ended up stuck in the country for an additional week. And EF Ultimate Break did help cover their expenses for them to stay over in the hotel and all that sort of thing, and, you know, rearranging their flights. But that's still awful because, I mean, you have a life back home you're trying to get back to. I didn't have similar flight times to any of my remaining friends, so I just said bye to them whenever it was time for them to take their shuttle. And mine was probably like 8 or 9 in the morning that I went to the airport and headed back home. And that was the end of my Ireland adventure. I think this is my shortest video since a while. It really was a cool trip. I don't know, even though Peru was longer ago, there's so much more memorable things to me. This trip really was just a late night purchase that I was grateful for, and I had a lot of great social times, but I don't know, this felt like the least special trip for me. I feel so entitled even saying this out loud because I had so many of my trip mates who were talking about how they had been waiting literally years, like saving up and planning around their job and school to be able to take this trip because Ireland meant so much to them for multiple reasons. Either they were fascinated by the culture or they had heritage there, all sorts of different reasons. And I was just saying, yeah, I'm here because a month ago I was looking at it on the internet and I just decided to click and buy. But to be totally honest, I was flying over there and I was just kind of like, I wish I could go somewhere not Europe because I had loved Peru so much, and now I'm going to Ireland, which is not, I'm not going to say is like England, especially knowing the history between the relations of those two countries. But, you know, everybody speaks English there. The food is familiar-ish and not necessarily my jam. There is a lot of culture to be had. It just wasn't the culture I was especially personally interested in going to see. I would love to go back, especially with my parents. I know that they would love it there. The bars, for some reason, even like the younger people, the 20s, 30s crowd over there loves American music, from like American soft rock from around the generation of my parents. So I would love to be able to take my mom someday. And I really did enjoy Ireland. It just wasn't as special to me as the other ones. Let me know if you're like someone who's super traveled. Maybe you've had a country like that for you too. It just, yes, it's awesome to be abroad and doing all these things, and there's so many people who would give anything for that opportunity. But when you have had that opportunity to go to multiple countries, some of them just aren't as special. Sorry, Ireland. Still love you. But yeah, I guess that pretty much wraps it up. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a beautiful weekend, and be sure to tune back in next Friday for a continuation of these international adventures. Bye!